Greetings and welcome to session number 5 in our study in the book of Exodus, into, through, and out of the wilderness. We've also taken a peek into the book of Numbers. Today we'll dabble a little in Deuteronomy. It has been my delight to walk with you in this journey of study in the season of Lent. Today we're taking a look at session number 5. Its title is A View from the Wilderness. How then shall we live? With our key texts coming from Exodus chapters 25 through 27, chapters 37 through 40, and also Deuteronomy, the last two chapters, 33 and 34. Again, I am Paul Pedersen, pastor serving Normandale Lutheran Church, and I'm so glad that you've tuned in to share in this journey through the wilderness. The story is told of a daughter who was going off to college for her very first year. And as she got into the car that morning with her parents for the 3-hour drive, she was anticipating the talk, the advice. At some point in the day, she knew she was going to receive this manifesto of advice on how to live on one's own. And she waited. They got to school, they started the sessions, the orientation, spent time together, time apart, had lunch, still no talk. Through the afternoon, they went for a walk throughout the campus, still no talk. And when the end of the day arrived, they dropped off her luggage in her dorm room, turned to her with tears in their eyes, offered her a great big hug, said, "I love you," and went on their way. She was surprised. Never did the talk take place. And then she opened up her luggage to begin to unpack, and there on the top was an envelope with her name on it. Aha, I knew it, she thought. And she opened it up, and there inside was a note. All it said was this: remember who you are. We love you, Mom and Dad. On the boundary between wilderness and new life lie deep and pervading questions. The crossing over gives one powerful reason to reflect backward and to imagine forward. Was our time in the wilderness purposeful? And will we exercise what we have learned as we cross over? Will we forget God's providence, blessing, and covenant as we encounter the future? Will the generations who come after us know about what it is that we have experienced? And will we live faithfully in this new reality? The Israelites have left. They've gone. Like every immigrant in human history, they left behind the trouble, the oppression, the life without opportunity. And with fortitude and conviction, they embarked upon a whole new life. Not knowing where they were going, but only that God's hand was leading and God's love supporting. Faith combined with fortitude is a recipe for fulfillment of promise. And so in this week of session 5 in our study, we conclude Exodus, and as I said, dabble in Deuteronomy. In each book, walking the final chapters that lead up to the people's entrance into the promised land. This is the boundary, the precipice, the river, the final step in God's promise, the long-awaited fulfillment of what God brings from the unknown future. Our work in Exodus has been extensive, fast-paced even. We've traversed the Red Sea and sang a song of triumph. We've encountered thirst and received water from a rock. We have grown hungry, grown G-R-O-W-N, and groaned G-R-O-A-N-E-D, hungry, and received manna and quail from heaven. We've murmured, complained, and whined in the wilderness, and God has provided, corrected, and cajoled us forward. New rules for life and community have been delivered, destroyed, and restored as the mountain took center stage. We've truly wandered, watched, waited, and whined as the length of the wilderness has tested our faithfulness. But God has never wavered. Oh, God was angry enough to vent a vaunting tirade, but with Moses' intervention and a reminder to Yahweh of the promise, Yahweh changed Yahweh's mind, And the people were saved again into, through, and out of the wilderness. From out of the wilderness, the Israelites carry the tabernacle, their holy place where God dwells. The final chapters that are on today's reading describe the detailed and elaborate construction of the tabernacle and how that translated into the life the people of Israel lived as they entered the promised land. Read those chapters carefully. The guide sheet focuses upon the tabernacle at the end of Exodus, followed with the questions that prompt more thought. But today, for this presentation, I want to shift our attention to Deuteronomy, the final 2 chapters, from which we glean the final words of the many, 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 many words of Moses. If I were to summarize this mighty book, noted as the final instruction of the wilderness prophet, it would be this: remember. As the people cross over the final boundary between death and new life, Moses calls on them to remember. Remember who you are. Remember where you've come from. And most of all, remember that it is God who saves you, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt, who gave you water and food in the wilderness, who saw you through your sin, who fulfills God's promises. And now God will lead you forward into promise, always exercising the character of God that you have learned in this wilderness. God is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. Remember, when you come into the land and encounter enemies, remember. When other gods are presented to distract and dissuade you from faithfulness to Yahweh, remember. And when you finally reap the benefits of the promise, when you gain the abundance of flocks and wealth of the land, remember. Yahweh is your God, and you are Yahweh's people. In chapter 33 of Deuteronomy, Moses highlights the tribes of Israel and the state and strength of each, beginning with the tribe named of the eldest son Jacob, known also as Israel, Reuben, and provides blessing along the way. Reuben, chapter 33, verse 6. May Reuben live and not die out, even though his numbers are few. Judah bears strength against adversaries. Levi would become the priestly tribe bearing proper worship practices. Benjamin carries the title beloved. Joseph reaps the choicest fruit and produce of the earth. Ephraim is myriads, and Manasseh thousands, leading the legion that will conquer the peoples before them. Zebulun and Issachar call the people to the mountain to worship and discern the mystery that is God. Dan is the offspring of a lion. Naphtali, full of the Lord's favor. And Asher is to be among the favorite of the brothers, dipping his foot in oil, whose days will bear the strength of iron and bronze. And so Moses, in the final chapter, 34, marks the final leg of the wilderness journey with a move from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top, Pisgah, which literally means summit. Moses reaches the overlook just east of the Jordan River, the long journey nearing completion. But Moses will not enter. Moses is not allowed to enter. Moses dies there on the mountain. He has given them their instruction, all of the ways in which he's built them into a people to live according to the law of God, Torah, instruction. His call to lead from slavery to freedom is accomplished. Joshua is commissioned. Moses looked over the landscape, identifying the lands of each tribe. He's buried in the land of Moab. And the Israelites wept for Moses in the plains of Moab for 30 days and then the period of mourning ended. Joshua, son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom because Moses had laid his hands on him. And the Israelites followed him just as the Lord had commanded to Moses. And the beat goes on and on and on as long as the people of God remember who they are. Poetic, prophetic, promise, and fulfillment. We bear the marks of a sinful people full of divine blessing, who walk in faith, meander in fear, and finally, in the end, are restored. Let it be so among us. Thank you for listening. I commend you to your study and your work. Pray without ceasing and prepare to return. Thanks be to God.